Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a very good Easter celebrating Jesus' resurrection and spending time with your family and thinking about what Easter means and why it's so special and why we should be so happy to know that God is a promise keeper who keeps his promises and who's victorious and wins and is in control. We're going to go back today and continue our story with Moses. Remember, Moses was born in Egypt during a time where Pharaoh was trying to have all the baby boys killed. But God protected Moses' life, and not only protected his life, but put him in a very special place where he would grow up in Pharaoh's palace and learn all kinds of things about how Pharaoh's palace worked. But he also made sure that Moses would know who he really was, who his Hebrew people were, the Israelites. And so when Moses grew up, remember, he was out walking around and he killed an Egyptian man who was beating up on a Hebrew slave, an Israelite slave. And so Moses had to run away into the desert where he met his wife and her family and became a shepherd. And that is where 40 years later, when he was 80 years old, he saw the burning bush in the middle of the desert. And God told him his plan to send Moses back to Egypt to deliver his people, because it was time for the Israelites to go back to the land that God had promised Abraham 400 years before. And so that's where we are today in the story. So remember, Moses is worried because his speech is not very clear. He stutters. But God has told him that he will send Moses' brother Aaron with him, and that Aaron will help him speak. But that God would tell Moses what it was he wanted him to do. And so that is where we are in our story. And I'm going to be reading some of the stuff and kind of telling you what that stuff means today. So God sent Moses and Aaron to Egypt. And the first people they talked to were the Israelite leaders, the people who were kind of the men of the city for the Israelites. And Moses told Aaron and them everything that God had told him when he met God at the burning bush. And he also showed them the miracle that that God told him to show with the snakes and the putting his hand in the rope. And so the Bible says that when he performed these signs in front of the Israelites, the people, they were so happy, they believed, and they heard that the Lord was concerned about them, and they bowed down and they worshiped. So they were happy, they believed what Moses said was going to happen, and they were a little bit excited. And so the next day, Moses and Aaron decided they were going to go and visit Pharaoh. And they were going to tell Pharaoh, God says it's time for you to let these people go. Let my people go is what Moses would say. Let us go and worship our God. But Pharaoh would say stuff like, I don't know this God of yours. I don't know him. Why would I let the Israelites go? There's so many of them, and they do a lot of work for me. Why would I let them go? No, I'm not going to let them go. And as a matter of fact, not only am I not going to let them go, I've been having them do all of this work for me. And what I'm going to have them do now is I'm going to have them do more work for me, because if they are lazy enough and they have enough time to think they can go and worship their God, they don't have enough work to do. And so Pharaoh told the taskmasters, the people who were in charge of the slaves, he said, hey guys, I want you to have the Israelites continue to make these bricks that they've been making. I want them to make as many as they've been making every day, but I want them to now have to go get their own supplies. You used to bring them the grass and the mud and all of this stuff. Now I want them to go get it because they're being lazy. And so this is what happened. The taskmasters went out and they told the slaves, they said, guys, you guys are getting lazy. You think you've got time to go worship your God? No, you don't. So now you're going to go out and you're going to go get your own supplies and you're going to build these bricks. And you still have to make as many as you were supposed to make in the past. Sometimes things happen to us that are hard. Things happen to us that, like, we get sick, or something happens to our house, or something happens to our family, somebody gets sick, somebody loses a job, or something like that. And it becomes a distraction. It takes our focus off of God. They were excited when Moses came and said, hey, it's time. God's going to get you out of here. They were ready to worship God. But then when this hard job came on, they got mad at Moses. And they got mad at God, really, because they expected it to immediately get released and to be able to go. But when their jobs got harder, they became distracted and they became bitter. And so what they said to Moses was, they said, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you, Moses, because you've made our jobs harder. You've made Pharaoh hate us, and he's making our lives so much harder. He's trying to kill us." And Moses was so confused. He's like, "God, I thought you sent me here to get them out of here, to bring them back to the land that you promised Abraham. But instead, Pharaoh's making their jobs harder." Do you know what God said to Moses? You know what I want you to know about the fact that Moses said that to God? It is okay to tell God when you're sad. It is okay to tell God when you're angry, because he already knows it, so it's okay to tell him. It's okay to say, "God, I don't understand what you're doing," because he would rather us be honest with him. And that's what Moses did. Moses was like, "God, I thought you sent me here to deliver these people, and instead Pharaoh is making their life harder." But if we ask God and we're honest with God and we tell him how we feel, you know what else we have to do? We have to listen to what he says back, right? We can't just complain and then walk away. We can complain and then we have to listen to maybe what he says back. And so this is what God said back to Moses. He said, "Now you're going to see what I will do to Pharaoh. I am the Lord, and I appeared to you and to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob and all of these people, and I made my covenant with you guys. I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from the slavery. I will also redeem you with my outstretched arm. And I will use great judgment with the Egyptians. But then you will know that I am your God. And the Egyptians will know that I am your God." Sometimes God allows these hard things to happen, these distractions to happen, because we can learn something about God when we go through those things. And only God can get us out of those things. And so God is telling Moses, "Look, Moses, I sent you to deliver the people. It's not going to be easy. And the reason it's not going to be easy is because I want the people, the Israelites, and the Egyptians to understand that I am the one doing it. Not you, not Pharaoh, not the Israelites. I'm in control. And that I am the one who's doing all of the work." And so this is what happened. Moses went to go talk to Pharaoh again, and he said, "Pharaoh, you need to let God's people go. They need to go worship." And Pharaoh said, I don't understand why you're coming to me. It's not going to happen. With what authority are you doing this? Show me why you think your God is so special." So what do you think Moses did? He showed Pharaoh the two signs that God had told him about in the burning bush. So he took his staff and he threw it down on the ground. And what happened to it? It turned into a snake, just like it had before. But Pharaoh had all of these magicians. And so Pharaoh says, "That's pretty cool. Magicians, can you do that?" And so Pharaoh's magicians got their sticks and they put their sticks on the ground. And guess what happened to their sticks? They also turned into snakes. Well, that was disappointing. But you know what? It says that Moses' snake ate the other two snakes. That's pretty cool. Something I want you to understand is that God is powerful. God is supernatural. He can do things outside of the laws of nature, like turning a stick into a snake. But Satan is also not human. He can also do things outside of the laws of nature. Only if God lets him, but he can. And he can use people as well. So Satan could use the magicians of Pharaoh to make Pharaoh not believe what Moses was saying and allowing the magician's sticks to turn into snakes as well. Well, obviously, Pharaoh was not impressed. And so he said, no, your people may not go. So the next day, Moses went back to see Pharaoh because God told him to. And here's where it all starts. You've probably heard this story. You might have seen the movie called Prince of Egypt. It's based on this story, but this is the story. This is the one out of the Bible. Okay? So God told Moses to go back and say, hey, let my people go. And he told him specifically to go to Pharaoh when Pharaoh was going to be out on the river, on the Nile. This is a big river that ran all the way through Egypt, and all of the people in Egypt used it for their water. And so he said, let my people go. And Pharaoh was like, no, why should I let the people go? And he said, because if you don't, God's going to bring plagues and stuff to you to show you that he's in control. And Pharaoh's like, bring it. And so Moses told Aaron, he said, Aaron, stick the staff into the water. Hold it over the water. Stretch it over the rivers. Stretch it over any water that you see around. And when he did that, you know what happened to the water? It didn't just turn red like food coloring. It turned into blood. Yuck. Can you imagine? Rivers of blood? That's pretty gross. Obviously, nobody could wash in it. Nobody could drink in it. Nobody could do any of that kind of stuff with it because it's blood. It's sick, right? So Pharaoh asked his magicians, he said, guys, can you do that? So they grabbed a pitcher of water that they had there and turned it into blood. And so Pharaoh said, nope, I'm not letting your people go. His heart was hardened. And it says in the Bible that it was like that for 7 days. People were having to dig away from the water until they could reach water just so they could have something to drink. Because back then they didn't have soda and stuff like that, right? So that was pretty terrible. Well, then after that, God sent Moses back again for plague number 2. The first one was water. Blood. So then he says, okay, Moses, go ask Pharaoh. So Moses goes to talk to Pharaoh and he says, Pharaoh, it's time for you to let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no, I'm not going to do it. He says, well, if you refuse, God is going to smite your whole territory. Smite means like send. Frogs all over your territory. Well, frogs are kind of cute sometimes. But can you imagine having so many that they're coming out of everything? Covering everything? Sloppy and making all that noise and on everything? Ooh, yuck. And so sure enough, when Pharaoh said no, Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff, and all of these frogs started showing up from everywhere, all over the place, and in every people's place, in the poor people's houses and in the Pharaoh's palace, everywhere. Well, the magicians came and did the same thing. So Pharaoh called Moses, and then after he got sick and tired of having all these frogs in his house and in his bed and in his bathroom and in his kitchen, yuck, he called Moses back and he said, hey guys, ask God to remove these frogs from me. Just ask him to get them out of here, and I'll let your people go and that they can sacrifice to God. My question is, why didn't he just ask his magicians to make the frogs go away? Obviously, his magicians couldn't do that. So he had to ask Moses. Well, because he said this, Moses said, okay, I'll ask God. So he went outside and asked God, and all the frogs went away. But when the frogs went away and he saw relief, Pharaoh said, never mind. They can't go. Well, so that was plague number 2, the frogs. So then the next day, God told Moses to go and talk to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. So he did. And when Pharaoh said no, he said, okay, God's going to send gnats and flies. Have you ever sat outside and there's this fly that just won't leave your face alone? It's really obnoxious, really annoying. Can you imagine have thousands and thousands of them? It said that all of the dust of the land became gnats. That's a bunch of mosquitoes and gnats and flies. But you know what else is neat? The Bible said that he was going to separate the land between the Egyptians and the Israelites. So the flies were going to be all over the Egyptians, but they weren't even going to bother the Israelites. So that the people And the Egyptians and Pharaoh would all know that this was very specifically God doing it. And so sure enough, he divided the land and covered the Egyptians in flies and gnats and mosquitoes. But not one went into the land of the Israelites. And so Pharaoh called Moses real quick because that got annoying very, very quickly. And he said, okay, I'll tell you what. You can, if you ask these things to go away, you guys can go. But you just can't go very far. You can go maybe 30 minutes, maybe a day, something like that. You can't go very far so that you'll come back. That is not what God told Moses to do. But Moses said, I will ask. So he asked, and the gnats and the mosquitoes and the flies went away. But when Pharaoh saw relief, he said, never mind. Never mind. No, you can't go. Again, so that was plague number 4. So we have the blood turning into water. The water turning into blood. The frogs all over the land. The gnats and the flies. And then now we have the next one. The cattle. You know what cattle are? They're cows. Okay? So Moses went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. And Moses said, okay, God is going to kill all of your cows. All of them. This is where you get your milk. This is what you get, all of that stuff. They're all going to die. But not a single one of the Israelites' cows are going to die. And sure enough, that's what happened. There was a very big distinction. All of the Egyptian cows were dying, but none of the Israelite cows were dying. So Pharaoh called him and he said, come on, tell God to make this stop. But then he still didn't let the people go. So Moses went to Pharaoh and he said, it's time to let the people go. And Pharaoh said, no, why? Why should I do that? He said, because God is going to send boils. Boils are like big blisters. Have you ever had a blister when you got a new shoe or something? Boils are like big blisters that have popped. They were all over. And so, sure enough, Pharaoh wouldn't let the people go, and people started getting covered, including Pharaoh, covered in boils, but not the Israelites, right? And so Pharaoh was going to ask his magicians, hey guys, can you do this? But guess what? His magicians couldn't even stand in front of Pharaoh because they were covered in boils themselves, and they couldn't make the boils go away. And so Pharaoh very, very quickly asked for them to go away. And God said, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to show you that I'm in control and that you need to let my people go. But Pharaoh said no. Well, the next thing he did is he sent Moses to talk to Pharaoh again and again, say, let my people go. And Pharaoh said no. And he said, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a hailstorm. And it's going to be the biggest hailstorm that has ever come. And there will never be another hailstorm this big ever again. It's going to kill everything that's outside, everything. And so if you go into your house and you get all of your chickens and your sheep and all that stuff and you put them inside, they'll be okay. But if you leave them outside, everything that's outside is going to die. That was really kind of nice because what happened is the Egyptians who'd been paying attention to the blood and the flies and the frogs and the boils, they were like, maybe I can put my animals and my family into a house and they'll be safe. Maybe God will spare mine. And so the Egyptians that decided to believe what Moses was saying obeyed what Moses said to do, and their stuff was fine. But everything else that was outside, the Bible says, everything else that was outside got torn down and killed by this hailstorm. And so Pharaoh called Moses and he said, Moses, I guess I've sinned because God is really punishing us. So just ask for forgiveness for me and sure, I'll let your people go and please just do it. Just make it stop. So Moses did. It stopped and Pharaoh sinned again. And he said, never mind. I just can't let them go. There's too many of them. I need them. And so again, another plague. And all of these are back to back to back to back. Can you imagine having this happen and then that happen and then the next thing happen all in the same time? Wouldn't you be tired? Wouldn't you be sick of it? But Pharaoh was very, very stubborn. And God was allowing him to be stubborn because it's bringing God glory. Well, Moses went to Pharaoh and he said, Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. And so Moses said, okay. Locusts, which are like yucky grasshoppers, are going to come in and they're going to destroy everything. They eat everything. And so, sure enough, there were so many locusts, it said that the entire ground was covered. And you can hear them eating, and they just eat every single green thing, every tree, every flower, every plant, everything that the hail didn't destroy, which even the stuff that it did destroy and knock onto the ground, it ate everything. And so Pharaoh's like, oh, get them out of here. How long will this happen to us? And not only that, but the people who worked for Pharaoh started coming to Pharaoh and they started saying, Pharaoh, don't you get it? All of this is happening to us because you won't let them go. Please let them go. Take care of us and let God's people go. And Pharaoh was like, no, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. But you know what, Moses? How about you make this go away, and I will let just the men, I'll let the men who are in charge and all that, I'll let them go worship. And Moses is like, that's not what God is saying. God is saying to let his people go. So the entire surface of the land, everything was covered with these yucky locusts. I can't imagine. Yuck. And then when Pharaoh still wouldn't obey, God sent Moses again and he said, let my people go. And when Pharaoh said no, he said, okay, there's going to be a thick darkness. It's going to be so dark you can feel it. They didn't have electricity back then. They used candle and stuff like that. He said, yeah, it's not going to help anything. It's going to be so dark. You're not even going to be able to see your hand in front of your face. And it was completely dark for 3 days. And so Pharaoh was like, please, just get out of here. Just go worship your God, but leave all of your cows and your sheep and stuff here, because he wanted to make sure that they would come back. And Moses is like, this is not what God is telling you to do. And so Pharaoh got so mad, he said, just get out of here. I don't ever want to see your face again. Just go. Just leave. I'm sick of you. And Moses was sad, and he said, you're right. This is about it. God has sent so many things to you, but this last one is going to be the worst of all. Because you have chosen not to let God's people go, he is going to kill the firstborn of every house. The firstborn is the oldest person. And that is really bad news, to have so many people die. God gave instructions to the Israelites because this Passover angel that was going to come and kill all of the firstborns was going to come over everything like a shadow. And so God gave very specific instructions to Moses. He said, this is very, very important. I want you to tell everybody to go inside their house and to take the blood of a clean lamb and to wipe that blood on the doorposts of your home. Because when this angel of death comes by, when it sees that blood covering your door, it's going to know you are covered by me, and it will pass over your house, and your firstborns will not die. Any of the Egyptians that chose to do this, that happened to them too. This is very symbolic of what was going to happen with Jesus, right? Jesus' blood covers me. And my sin, God doesn't see it because I'm covered by Jesus' blood. But this was a very, very sad plague. All the other plagues were terrible. They were gross, or they were inconvenient, or they were painful. But this one was going to kill people. And Pharaoh was very, very proud and very, very stubborn, and he chose not to let God's people go. And so that night, everybody went into their house, and the people who covered their doorposts with the blood, they were okay. They did something else in their house that we can talk about next week. They call it a Passover celebration type thing. Anyway, while they were doing that, that's when this death angel came over and killed all the firstborns. And you could hear people all over the city crying because people were dying. And it was because of sin. It was because Pharaoh was being stubborn. It was because he was not willing to listen to and obey God. So I want you to know a couple of things about this story. It's a long story today because there were 10 plagues. That's a lot of things to talk about. And we're going to talk about what happened after the plagues next week. But I want you to know, I want you to remember that when bad things happen, sometimes those bad things can be a distraction to us, to keep us from thinking about God and doing things with God, because we're so busy messing with being sick, or so busy messing with trying to make money, or so busy with whatever. But we need to not forget God, because God is ultimately in control of everything, and he's using that situation to bring himself glory. We need to make sure that we're learning and listening and not being like Pharaoh and hardening our hearts to God. And then we need to make sure that we're also being someone like Moses, who tells other people how they can avoid difficult situations, right? When Moses was telling Pharaoh what to do, the people who were listening to him and who were obeying him, they were okay. So we need to make sure that we're telling other people about what we know to be the truth, that Jesus is the answer to our problems, not friends and not money and not other things. Okay, so we need to be good friends to people and tell them about Jesus. Anyway, I think it's really cool that we're going through this story right now while all of this is going on in our world today, because it's a reminder that God is still in control, that God sometimes allows these things to happen, but he lets them happen for a reason, and we need to make sure that we're listening to God and what he wants us to learn. I hope you guys have a wonderful week this week. I hope you think about how lucky we are and how blessed we are that God is taking care of us, that we're safe in our houses, and that we have food, and that everybody's healthy, and that we would pray for the people who are suffering, and that we would look forward to getting back together and being able to worship together, just like the Israelites were wanting to leave Egypt to go worship together freely. So I want you to be praying for people's safety and people's hearts, that they would understand who God is. And I would love to get a note from you or a coloring picture from you, because I miss seeing you. So if that's something that you would like to do to be entertained this week, send me something. Send me an email or a text with your mom's help, or draw me a picture and send it to me. I would love to see that. I hope you have a great week. I miss you guys so much. Bye.